All right, welcome back. Yeah, so in the chat earlier, people were asking about what are ways that we can start doing a better job of debugging diversity within the Elm community. And I think some of the biggest things I think you can do are find local organizations that are building communities that are focused around underrepresented groups, women, people of color, LGBTQ. There are a lot of tech groups in different cities that are that have already started doing a lot of that work. And certainly, if you have the time, find those groups, make connections there, support their events, support them financially. If they are looking for volunteers, volunteer for those groups. I've been volunteering, for instance, at Hackbright Academy in San Francisco for the last couple of years, and it's a great way to start understanding at a more experiential level the issues that people in those groups represent when they're trying to get into tech or when they're working a job where they're the only person of their gender or of their race that works at that company. It's an experience that if you don't live through it every day, it's really hard to get your head around the subtleties of the issues and an understanding of what kind of difficulties people face and what kind of needs they have. So I think connecting with people who are from those backgrounds is an important place to start. Also, making sure you're educating yourself about the issues and not simply like asking questions of women and of people of color about their experience. You need to do some of the work and educate yourself. And also making sure you're reflecting on your own actions and your own interactions and making changes as necessary. All right, so I guess I'm going to commit this real quick. Oh yeah, we should also take this fswatch command, and I like to put it in a script. I'm going to make a new bash script called watch.sh. Put that there, and then in the README, we will say development commands. All right. Then let me run that command instead. Oh, we've got to chmod it. Plus X. So we're going to make this executable by people. Okay, now we can run that. And we're running Elm Reactor. Okay, so I need a third window. Okay, so we updated the README, we added the watch, and we added the Firebase. And, okay, still, no one has done anything weird to my database. I will be changing the access keys and tokens after the stream. But I guess I'm surprised we don't have very many people with a hacking background on the stream, I guess. Nobody has written extra data into my database. Okay, sample HTML page, Firebase from JavaScript. Let's push that up. Hopefully the link in the bottom corner is working and pointing to the right place. All right, so now onto the Elm. So here's what we want to do. Let's get the reading working first. So what we want to start out with is making a new Elm file. I'll call this landing page.elm. How I'm thinking of it. We're going to have main, which will be html.text landing page. If I could spell that right. Not that it matters. It's placeholder text. And then we'll need to import HTML. So let's see what's going on. So I think I need to restart my watch script. Okay, so that compiled the form. Let's go ahead and start a couple things here. So we're running elm-make for the form. We're going to need to run multiple things. Just comment this one out for the moment. And for now, we're going to call landing.js. This will compile the landing page. I guess we may as well just call it landingpage.js to be consistent. All right, so let's restart our watch script. And then try saving this. Okay, so that's compiling. Then here's our JavaScript file. Looks great. Or looks like compiled Elm code. Okay, so here's our Firebase HTML. Why don't we just rename this also to be landingpage.html. And then what we're going to do is have a script tag, load landingpage.js. And you have to do this with a closing script tag or it won't work, as we discovered a couple episodes ago. And then we're also going to have our own script where we run elm.main.fullscreen and start it up. All right, so let's see how we did. I'm going to go back to the root here and go to landing page HTML. And I don't see anything, so let's check the console. Cannot read property append child of null. Yes, so this happens when you don't have a body, or when when you try to run Elm full screen before there is a body. So what we really need to do is put a body tag around this part where we load the Elm code. And there we go. Okay, so we got our landing page. We're still getting this stuff from JavaScript. I'm going to comment that out. Shrink this down. Okay, so this is coming from our Elm code. Landing page. All right, so what do we want to do? What we'd like to do is get data from Firebase and render it. So I guess let's start defining our application. We're going to have a model. And for that, we're going to have local info, which is going to be a maybe because it's going to start empty because Firebase loads all the data asynchronously. So we won't have any of the information immediately. So we'll start with the local info being nothing. And then when we get data from Firebase, we'll store it as a just in this maybe. And for now, let's just have it as a string. And we'll start defining some data structures and doing JSON decoding in a minute. Then we're going to have our message type. Let's wait for a minute on the update. And then we're going to have our view is going to be model to HTML of message. And let's just toString the model for now. Then main is going to be a program with never, meaning we don't have any JavaScript flags getting passed to the application. And we're going to use HTML app.program. Init is going to return a tuple. Oops, pardon me. Init is going to return a tuple, which is our initial model, and command.none. Our update function is going to be, update. Let's just write that now. Update is going to take a message and a model, return a new model and any commands. We'll just put our placeholder one in there for now. We're going to have a type message equals no message yet. We'll get to those shortly. Then we're going to have subscriptions equals, this is an anonymous function, which will just return sub.none for the moment. That, and view equals view. All right, and we haven't defined initial model, so let's do that. It's going to be a model, and we'll have local info equals nothing. And we haven't imported html.app. And it can't find type HTML, so I usually just do exposing HTML on there. And we've successfully generated it. Hooray! Okay, so here's our data. So now let's hook this up to get information from Firebase. So we're going to need to use a port to do this. So let's see how we want to hook this up. So the way we do this is when we start the Elm app, we save it into a variable, and then we can say app.ports. Whatever we want. So let's call this local. Oh, no. Okay, how is this going to work? So basically what we need is a zip code. So we want our Elm program to provide us with a zip code, and we will take that zip code, subscribe to the appropriate ref in the database, and then whenever we get values, we need to send data back into Elm. Okay, so I guess we've got a couple things to wire up. So first we need a way to receive a zip code that is the relevant thing. So I guess the way I'm thinking about this is the page is only going to allow one zip code to be viewed at one time. I think that seems reasonable. We'll ask people for their zip code in the very beginning, and then they'll be taken to a page with information about that particular zip code. So let's imagine we have a port. So we'll say app.ports, and we'll have a port named change zip code. And we're going to subscribe to that. And we're going to expect to receive a string from Elm. So let's put a console log there to just check things work. And let's see. So if we reload now, we should get an error. Yes, because the change zip code port doesn't exist, so let's define it in Elm. So I usually define it here near my program. Port, change zip code, and this is going to be an outgoing thing from Elm. So this is going to be a function that takes a string and returns a command. And we don't know what type of value it's going to return back. In fact, it's never going to return back anything. So that's why we leave this as the lowercase message, which is just a variable. So we've got change zip code. Okay, so here's a problem. We have to make this a port module. Do that at the top. This is the port module now, and it's successfully compiled. Let's see. Okay, so it looks like everything compiled, so let's send a value out. So for now, let's always just initialize with my zip code. So in our init, this happens when the program starts up. Let's make a change zip code command. So rather than command.none, we're going to do change zip code and give it the string that we want, so 94107. So this should now send a value out this port when the Elm app starts up, and we should get it in JavaScript and see it printed to the console. And in fact, we do right here. Great. Now let's wire the rest of this up. So once we get the zip code, this is where we now want to subscribe to Firebase. So that was this code. So let's grab this. And here, we're going to use the zip code that we get from Elm. Then we're going to subscribe to that, and we should get data back from it. So let's just try that out. And yeah, it looks like it works. Let's try, just to test this, let's put a different zip code in. So 00001. And reload. And we get null, which is correct because there's no data in the database at that time. Or sorry, at that path in the database. Cool. What's next? Now we want to send this data back to Elm. So we're going to do that with another port. We're going to say app.ports.local info, or let's call it zip code data. We'll send, and we're just going to send this JSON object back. And if we refresh now, it should give an error. Yep, can't read property send because we haven't created this port yet. So since from the Elm side this is an incoming port to Elm, zip code data needs to be defined as a subscription. So we're going to have a port zip code data, and subscriptions work by first you have to give it a function that takes the data we're going to get. So that's going to be a json.value and returns a message. Then we get out of that a subscription of type message. So now let's subscribe to this. So instead of no subscriptions, we're going to subscribe to zip code data. And to do that, we have to pass it a function. So for that, we should create a message type. We'll call this zipcode data. This will take a json.value. And then we'll use this as our constructor. So this type constructor is a function that will take a JSON value and give back a message. All right, so let's see what we've messed up so far. Can't find JSON.value. Right, so we need to import that. And that's actually defined in JSON.encode. I usually do it this way. There's like the JSON encode and decode package, and they kind of have conflicting functions inside of them. It's a bit messy, but let's try this for now. Okay, and it looks like it compiled, so let's reload. Okay, I don't see anything happening, but that's probably because we are just ignoring our messages. Let's change our update and put a debug in here. And when we get a got zip code data with JSON, we're not going to do anything with it yet, but we will print it out here, debugging. Hey, cool. So we got that, and let's also do one other check. Say, if we change the value, we should get another Elm update. And in fact, we do. Great. Cool. That all is looking good. So what do we want next? Well, why don't we commit this first? That went way faster than I was expecting. Okay, so what did we do? We renamed Firebase HTML to be landing page HTML. And we added landing page.elm. And we updated the watch script. And this JavaScript thing is a build artifact. So let's go to our git ignore and ignore landing page.js. Okay, what else? So we updated the git ignore, we renamed this file, and we updated our watch script. All right, Firebase is working from Elm. All right. So I think the next thing we ought to do is, rather than just saving this as, oh, well, no. What we want to do is take this JSON that we get and stick it in our model. And to do that, we actually need to define the data, or the data structure in Elm that's going to represent these zip codes. So let's try this out. We're going to have zip code info. Let's define it. And we're going to have police chief, which is going to be person info. And this will have a name, which is a maybe string, because the whole point of this example app was that there wouldn't be any information to start with, but as people submitted information, it would get filled in. Excuse me. And then our local info. Oh, okay, so that's all set up now. Great. All right. So here, when we get this new JSON, we'll have to try to decode it. And then if we get something, we will stick it into the model. So what's the best way to write this? We basically want to change local info. So local info is going to equal decode zip code data of the JSON, and we'll need to define this. So this is going to be a function that takes a JSON.value, and let's have it return a maybe, because the parsing can fail if the JSON doesn't represent the data structure that we're expecting. This is going to be a maybe of zip code info. All right, so to do this, we're going to look in our JSON package. Let's see what functions we have available. This is in the core package in JSON decode. And I think we want to use this. We give this a decoder and the JSON value, and it gives back a result. And we aren't going to care about the error cases. If we get a result, we'll just convert the result to a maybe. So let's import json.decode as decode, since we already have something imported as JSON. So then we're going to say decode.decode value. We're going to give it a decoder, which we haven't created yet. Zip code info decoder. Then we're going to give it the value, which is this JSON. And then we're going to get back a result. So if we check our error messages, we should be getting some right now. Okay, zip code info decoder. The first problem, we need to define that. So I usually define it here near my type. This is going to be a decode.decoder of zip code infos. And okay, let's just write this while we're here. This is going to be decode.object. Is there an object 1? There's only one thing in this record, so it might not be an object for only one thing. Objects. Oh, there is an object 1. Great. Cool. So we're going to have an object with one thing. To create it, then, we're going to use this kind of shortcut. When we make a type alias, this also gives us a function called zipcodeinfo, which takes each of the field values and produces the record. So we're going to use this as a function, and then we'll have to give it a at. I like to use decode.at rather than using this weird infix operator. So we're going to decode at, and here we're specifying where in the JSON we're reading from. Let's look at this again. So this is the object we're going to be getting. So we're going to have a key named police chief, and then inside that we'll have our record for the person info. So the key here is called police chief, so that's what we'll put here. And then we need to give it the decoder for person info. And the person decoder. Oh, yeah, Arkham, it looks like the stream is lagging a bit. Because I just talked about using at, and I'm just seeing your comment right now suggesting that. So yes, good thinking. So the value inside of this key is going to be another object, and we'll create a decoder for that as well. Person info decoder. All right, so I think that's good. We're going to need to define our person info decoder also, which is going to be a decoder of person info. And this will work exactly the same way. we are going to decode object 1, meaning an object with one parameter. Function to construct that object is personinfo. Then we'll use decode.at and check. So here we're using the name field in our JSON. And we need a decoder for maybe strings. Let's see. I'm used to, at work, we use this other package called JSON Decode Pipeline. So I'm a little rusty on the core decoder library. Let's see what in here works with maybes. Okay. So there's just a maybe in here. So that means our decoder for this maybe string is going to be decode.maybe decode.string. So maybe essentially takes another decoder and just wraps it. Okay. So let's check our compiler errors now. Now, onto this function, decode zip code data. We want it to return a maybe, but it's getting a result. So I think we just say result.toMaybe. That works. Cool. So this basically just drops the error message and gives us a maybe back, or in the case of an error, it'll give us nothing. All right. So let's reload, see what we get here. Hey, great. So we can see the data got filled in. Let me bump up the font a bit. When I reload, we see nothing, just briefly for a split second. And then we get the data back. Cool. So I think now we can close the JavaScript console. Yeah. So what have we done so far? We have successfully connected to Firebase. We tried out reading and writing data. And then we've also created some ports that allow us to tell Firebase, or tell our JavaScript what we want to subscribe to in Firebase. And then when we get data, we send it back to Elm. Okay. So there's one cleanup here. So currently, our Elm app is only ever sending one message through the port to change the zip code. But if that changes in the future, there will kind of, I guess, be a memory or a resource leak here, because every time JavaScript gets a new zip code, it's subscribing to a new zip, to a new ref. So what I'd like to do here is make this so that it unsubscribes from the old ref every time we have one. So I'm going to make JavaScript a zip code ref, set it to null initially, and then we'll say if zip code ref, then I just happen to remember this from the last time I used Firebase. Just say auth. And then we can store our zip code. We can store this new ref that we're referring to for the new zip code. We'll store that in this variable, and then subscribe to it. Yes, and Arkham is noting that we didn't need to be this nested for our decoding. We could have just used @policechief, name and get the name directly out here. I'm expecting maybe to have reusable views for displaying people, but I don't know how this will play out. But yeah, you could totally decode the name out from a nested record in the JSON in one line if you wanted to, but I think it might be useful to have these nested records so we can reuse person info, but I could be wrong about that. Maybe I am prematurely making this reusable when it shouldn't need to be. Okay, so let's check if this works. I'm going to bring back up the JavaScript console, refresh this, and it looks good. Okay, so now if multiple zip codes are changed in the future, it won't continue to leak resources as new zip codes are subscribed to. It'll only keep one open subscription to Firebase. Okay, so let's check this in. And I think after checking this in, I'm going to take another short break. So I'm actually surprised how quickly we got through all of this and got Firebase up and running. So I would love to take suggestions from the chat room if there's any particular things that people want to see related to Firebase or decoding or the view. Let me know in the chat right now, and then after we take a short break, I will come back to those. So what did we do here? Send data from Firebase down. All right. So we will be back in just a few minutes, and let me know in the chat if there's anything specific that you would like us to do next.